A little girl gives her last dollar to a man, not knowing he's a disguised millionaire. What he does next shocks everyone. Before we get into it, let's make this moment global. Leave a comment in your own language. The bitter Chicago wind cut through William Harrison's threadbare coat like a knife, but he didn't move from his position against the cold brick wall. At 72, Bill had spent the last 3 months perfecting this disguise. The worn-out shoes with holes, the fingerless gloves, the carefully cultivated stubble that made him look like just another forgotten soul on Michigan Avenue. "Spare some change?" he mumbled to the passing crowds, his voice hoarse from the cold December air. Most people hurried past without even glancing down, their designer coats and expensive shoes clicking rhythmically against the concrete. Some dropped coins without stopping, others pretended not to see him at all. Bill watched them all with calculating eyes, hidden beneath bushy grey eyebrows. 3 months ago, his financial advisor had suggested this social experiment after Bill complained about the emptiness he felt despite his $8 billion fortune. "See how the other half lives," Marcus had said. "Maybe it'll give you perspective." But perspective wasn't what Bill found in those cold morning hours. What he discovered was far more disturbing. The complete indifference of wealth towards suffering. The same people who attended his charity galas would step over him on the street without a second thought. A small figure appeared at the edge of his vision, moving differently than the adults. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, with bright red mittens and a worn purple coat that had seen better days. Her blonde hair peeked out from under a knitted hat, and her blue eyes seemed to actually see him when she stopped. "Mister," she said softly, reaching into her small pocket, "are you hungry?" Bill looked up, surprised by the genuine concern in her young voice. She pulled out a crumpled dollar bill, clearly her last one, judging by how carefully she handled it. "This is all I have," she whispered, placing the bill in his outstretched hand. "But maybe you can get something warm to drink." Before Bill could respond, a woman's voice called out from down the street, "Emma, come on, honey, we need to go." The little girl, Emma, smiled at him one more time. "I hope you feel better, mister. Merry Christmas." Bill watched her run toward a tired-looking woman with dark circles under her eyes, and something inside his chest tightened. The woman, clearly the child's mother, glanced back at him with a mixture of understanding and worry, as if she knew exactly what it felt like to have nothing. As they disappeared into the crowd, Bill stared down at the crumpled dollar in his palm. In all his years of wealth, all his business dealings worth millions, no money had ever felt as heavy as this single dollar bill given by a child who probably needed it more than he did. He stood up slowly, his joints protesting after hours on the cold ground, and followed the direction they had gone. Something about that little girl's genuine kindness had cracked something open inside him that had been frozen for years. 47 years ago, William Harrison had been a different man, the young entrepreneur with fire in his eyes and dreams bigger than the small apartment he shared with his beloved wife, Margaret. They had nothing but each other and an unshakable belief that hard work would eventually pay off. "One day, Billy," Margaret used to say, running her fingers through his dark hair as they sat on their second-hand couch, "we're going to help so many people. When we make it big, we'll never forget what it feels like to count every penny." Those words echoed in Bill's mind now as he sat in the back of his Bentley, still wearing the homeless man's costume that had become his reality check. His driver, Thomas, had picked him up 6 blocks away, as instructed, and was now navigating through the downtown traffic without asking questions. Thomas had been with the Harrison family for 15 years and had learned when not to pry. Margaret had died 5 years ago, leaving behind a hole in Bill's chest that no amount of money could fill. Cancer had taken her slowly, expensively, despite having access to the best doctors money could buy. In her final days, she had made him promise to remember who they used to be, to never let wealth make him forget the value of simple human kindness. But somewhere along the way, Bill had broken that promise. His business empire grew larger, his social circle became more exclusive, and his heart had gradually hardened like cement. Even his relationship with his son James had deteriorated into formal business meetings and holiday obligations. The irony wasn't lost on him that a homeless man's disguise had shown him more genuine human connection in 3 months than his real life had provided in 5 years. Yet today, a little girl's dollar had shattered something inside him that he thought was permanently broken. "Take me home, Thomas," Bill said quietly, fingering the crumpled bill. "And tomorrow morning, I want you to find out everything you can about a little girl named Emma and her mother. They were on Michigan Avenue around noon today." Thomas glanced in the rearview mirror, his weathered face showing no surprise. "Of course, sir. Anything specific you're looking for?" Bill closed his eyes, seeing Emma's concerned face again. "I want to know their story. All of it." As the Bentley pulled through the gates of his Lake Forest mansion, Bill realized that for the first time in years, he felt something that had been missing from his life. Purpose. That little girl had given him more than $1. She had given him a reason to remember who he used to be. The mansion felt even emptier than usual as he walked through its marble halls, past expensive artwork that no longer brought him any joy. Margaret's portrait smiled down at him from the grand staircase, and he could almost hear her voice. "What are you going to do about it, Billy?" This time, he had an answer. Sarah Collins stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the small window of their cramped apartment, while Emma did homework at the worn dining table behind her. The rejection letter from Northwestern Memorial Hospital lay crumpled in the trash can, joining 2 others she'd received that week. 3 months of job searching, and still nothing substantial enough to cover their mounting bills. "Mama, I finished my math," Emma called out, her voice bright, despite the worry that sometimes creased her small forehead. "Can we make hot chocolate?" Sarah turned around, forcing a smile. At 34, she felt decades older than her years. The past 2 years, since Michael's death, had aged her in ways that no amount of rest could reverse. Dark circles under her green eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights spent calculating bills and stretching every dollar until it screamed. "Of course, sweetheart," she said, checking the nearly empty canister of cocoa mix. "There was just enough for 1 cup. You know what? You have that hot chocolate. Mama's not really in the mood tonight." Emma looked up from her papers, her intuitive blue eyes, so much like her father's, studying Sarah's face. "Are you sure? We could share it." The offer, so innocent and generous, nearly broke Sarah's composure. This was exactly the kind of child Michael had hoped to raise, someone who thought of others before herself, even when she had so little to give. "I'm sure, baby, you enjoy it." As Sarah prepared the hot chocolate, her mind wandered to the morning's events. She had seen Emma talking to the homeless man outside the pharmacy where they'd picked up Sarah's prescription for the migraines that had been plaguing her since losing her job. By the time she caught up with her daughter, Emma was already walking away, and Sarah's heart had sunk when she realized what had happened. That $1 had been Emma's allowance, earned by helping Mrs. Peterson next door carry groceries. It was supposed to buy her a small toy from the dollar store, something Emma had been saving for weeks. Instead, she had given it away without hesitation to someone she thought needed it more. "Emma," Sarah said gently as she handed over the steaming mug, "about this morning, that man you gave your $1 to." "He looked really cold, Mama," Emma said simply, wrapping her small hands around the warm mug. "And sad. I thought it might help." Sarah sat down across from her daughter, fighting back tears. How could she explain to an 8-year-old that kindness was a luxury they couldn't afford right now? that every dollar mattered when you were 2 months behind on rent and facing eviction in January. That was very kind of you, sweetheart. Daddy would have been proud. Emma's face lit up at the mention of her father. Really? Do you think he would have done the same thing? Absolutely, Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Michael had been that kind of man, the type who would give his last dollar to help someone in need. It's part of what had made his medical bills so devastating. He had refused to let his illness become a burden to his family until it was too late to protect them from the financial fallout. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. Sarah's stomach dropped when she saw the landlord's number on the display. She let it go to voicemail, not ready to hear another threat about eviction. "Was that Mr. Rodriguez?" Emma asked quietly. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "Maybe he's calling to say Merry Christmas early," Emma suggested hopefully. Sarah pulled her daughter into a tight hug, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "Maybe, baby. Maybe." But they both knew better. Christmas was 3 weeks away, and unless a miracle happened, they might be spending it in a homeless shelter. The irony that Emma had given away their last dollar to a homeless man wasn't lost on Sarah. In a few weeks, they might be the ones needing that kindness from strangers. Thomas Martinez had been in the private investigation business for over 20 years before William Harrison hired him as a driver. His skills hadn't diminished, only found a different purpose. By 9 a.m. the next morning, he had a comprehensive file sitting on Bill's mahogany desk. "The girl's name is Emma Rose Collins, age 8, Thomas reported, standing at attention in Bill's study. "Lives with her mother, Sarah Marie Collins, age 34, in a one-bedroom apartment on North Clark Street. The father, Michael David Collins, died 22 months ago from pancreatic cancer." Bill looked up from the photographs Thomas had discreetly taken, Emma walking to school with her backpack that had seen better days, Sarah leaving what appeared to be yet another job interview with defeat written across her features. "Tell me about the financial situation," Bill said, though he suspected he already knew. "Grim, sir, Mrs. Collins was a registered nurse at Chicago General until 7 months ago, when budget cuts eliminated her position. She's been applying for work consistently, but hasn't found anything that pays enough to cover their expenses. They're currently 2 months behind on rent, facing eviction January 15th. The date hit Bill like a physical blow. January 15th was Margaret's birthday. "The medical bills from Mr. Collins's treatment?" he asked. Thomas flipped through the pages. "Substantial. Even with insurance, the family accumulated over $180,000 in debt. Mrs. Collins has been making minimum payments when possible, but—" He gestured helplessly. Bill studied Emma's school photo, seeing the bright intelligence in her eyes, the same hopeful smile she had given him yesterday. "What about extended family, support systems?" "Mrs. Collins is estranged from her parents. They disapproved of her marriage to Michael, who came from a working-class background. Mr. Collins' parents died when he was young. There's one grandmother on the father's side, but she's in a nursing home with dementia. No siblings on either side." The picture Thomas painted was heartbreakingly clear. A small family that had been clinging to each other against all odds, now reduced to a desperate mother trying to provide for a child who was wise beyond her years. "The girl's education?" Bill asked. "Honor roll student at Lincoln Elementary. Her teacher notes that she's exceptional in mathematics and reading, but—" Thomas hesitated. "But what? She's been bringing smaller lunches to school lately, sometimes just a piece of bread. The school counselor has been keeping an eye on the situation." Bill set down the file, his hands trembling slightly. Emma had given him her last dollar while she was going to school hungry. The generosity was so profound, so pure, that it made his chest ache. "There's one more thing, sir," Thomas said quietly. "I made some inquiries about Mr. Collins' background. He was a paramedic before he got sick, worked for Chicago Fire Department Station 19. Something about that detail nagged at Bill, but he couldn't place why. Anything else about his work history? He was commended several times for bravery, saved a lot of lives over his 15-year career. There was one incident. Thomas consulted his notes. 5 years ago, he was part of a team that responded to a multi-car accident on Lakeshore Drive during a blizzard, pulled 3 people from burning vehicles before the fire department arrived. Bill frowned. 5 years ago. That would have been around the time Margaret was getting sicker, when they were traveling back and forth to various specialists. They had been caught in that same blizzard, he remembered, their car sliding off the road. "Thomas," Bill said slowly, "I need you to pull the emergency response records from that accident. December 18th, 5 years ago. Lakeshore Drive?" "Yes, sir. Is there something specific?" "I'm not sure yet, but I have a feeling this story is about to get much more complicated." As Thomas left to pursue the records, Bill walked to the window overlooking his perfectly manicured gardens. Somewhere out there, Emma was probably in school, her stomach growling while she concentrated on her lessons. Her mother was likely pounding the pavement, searching for work that would let her keep their small apartment. And here he sat, in a mansion worth more than most people would see in 10 lifetimes, because a little girl's kindness had reminded him what it felt like to be human. Margaret's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, "What are you waiting for, Billy?" For the first time in years, he knew exactly what he had to do. The emergency response records arrived at Bill's office by courier at 2 p.m., and his hands shook as he opened the manila envelope. Inside were detailed reports, photographs, and witness statements from the December 18th accident that had nearly claimed his and Margaret's lives 5 years earlier. As he read, the blood drained from his face. Unit 47 responded at 3:47 p.m. to multiple vehicle collision on Lakeshore Drive southbound, mile marker 23. Whiteout conditions, visibility near zero. First responder on scene, paramedic Michael David Collins, Chicago Fire Department. Bill's vision blurred as he continued reading. The report described how Michael had arrived first, before the fire trucks, and had single-handedly pulled 3 people from vehicles that were either on fire or in immediate danger of explosion. The third person saved had been a 77-year-old woman suffering from stage 4 ovarian cancer, who had been trapped in the back seat of a black Bentley, Margaret. His fingers found the next page. Patient Margaret Elizabeth Harrison, age 67, extracted from vehicle and stabilized by paramedic Collins. Patient's husband, William Harrison, suffering from mild concussion and shock, both transported to Northwestern Memorial Hospital by ambulance. Bill collapsed into his chair, the papers scattering across his desk. Michael Collins, Emma's father, Sarah's husband, had saved Margaret's life that day, had given them 6 more months together, 6 months of precious time that Bill had treasured after Margaret passed away. And he had never known the man's name. The official report continued with details that made Bill's heart race. Paramedic Collins sustained second-degree burns to his hands and arms during the rescue, but refused treatment until all victims were safely extracted, recommended for commendation. There was more. Medical records showed that the smoke inhalation Michael suffered that day had damaged his lungs, making him more susceptible to the cancer that would eventually kill him. In a very real sense, Michael Collins had traded his life for Margaret's. Bill's hands trembled as he reached for his phone and dialed Thomas. "I need you to find out everything about Michael Collins' medical treatment," he said when Thomas answered, "specifically whether there's any connection between his lung damage from the December 2019 accident and his subsequent cancer diagnosis." "Already on it, sir. I had the same thought when I saw the records. I'm pulling his medical files now." While he waited, Bill walked to Margaret's portrait in his study. Her painted eyes seemed to look right through him, holding the same gentle wisdom they had possessed in life. "You knew, didn't you?" he whispered to the portrait. "Somehow, you always knew we'd cross paths with that family again." The phone rang 20 minutes later. "Sir," Thomas said, his voice heavy with implications, "Dr. Sarah Chen at Northwestern Memorial confirmed it. The lung damage Michael sustained during your rescue significantly increased his risk for the type of cancer that killed him. It wasn't definitive, but it was a contributing factor." Bill sank into his chair, overwhelmed by the cosmic weight of what he had discovered. Michael Collins had died, at least partially, because he had saved Margaret's life. And now Michael's widow and daughter were facing homelessness while Bill sat in his mansion, unaware that he owed them everything. The generosity Emma had shown him yesterday, giving her last dollar to a stranger, was inherited from a father who had given his health, and ultimately his life, to save people he didn't even know. "Thomas," Bill said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to pay off their medical debt, all of it, anonymously. That's $180,000, sir. I don't care if it's $1.8 million, and pay it off today. And their rent. Make sure they can't be evicted. Set up a payment system that looks like it's coming from a charity or relief fund." "Understood. Anything else?" Bill looked again at Emma's school photo, seeing Michael's eyes looking back at him through his daughter's innocent face. "Find out what Emma wants for Christmas. And Thomas, this stays between us. No one can know the connection. Not yet." As Bill hung up the phone, he realized that his 3 months of playing homeless had led him to this moment for a reason. Emma's dollar hadn't just reminded him of his humanity. It had shown him the way to honor both Margaret's memory and Michael's sacrifice. But first, he had a little girl's Christmas to save. 3 days after William Harrison discovered the truth about Michael Collins, Sarah was sitting at her kitchen table, staring at a letter that made no sense whatsoever. The official letterhead read, "Chicago Community Care Foundation," and the contents were too good to be true. "Dear Mrs. Collins," she read aloud for the 3rd time, "we are pleased to inform you that your family has been selected to receive emergency financial assistance through our holiday relief program. Due to a generous anonymous donation, your outstanding medical debt has been paid in full, and your rent account has been brought current through the end of February." Emma looked up from her breakfast of toast and peanut butter, the last of both in the apartment. "What does that mean, Mama?" Sarah's hands were shaking. The letter included official documentation from the hospital showing a 0 balance on Michael's medical bills and a receipt from their landlord showing rent paid through February 28th. I think it means we're not going to lose our home," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. Emma dropped her toast and ran around the table to hug her mother. "Really? We can stay here?" "The letter says so. I don't understand how this happened." But even as relief flooded through her, Sarah felt a nagging suspicion. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Someone was watching them, helping them, and she had no idea who or why. CTA. Before we continue this incredible story, I have to pause here because I know many of you are feeling the same chills I felt when I first heard about what happened next. If this story is touching your heart the way it touched mine, please take a moment to hit that like button and share in the comments. What's the most generous thing someone has ever done for you? Your stories inspire me to keep bringing you these life-changing tales. And don't forget to subscribe, because what William discovers next will completely change everything you thought you knew about this family. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. Sarah recognized the number as Northwestern Memorial Hospital's billing department. "Mrs. Collins, this is Jennifer from Patient Accounts. I'm calling to confirm that your account has been settled in full by the Chicago Community Care Foundation. We just wanted to make sure you received the documentation." Yes, I just got the letter this morning, but I don't understand." I never applied for any assistance program. Sometimes these foundations work proactively, identifying families in need. You should be very grateful. This was a substantial amount. After hanging up, Sarah felt a mix of overwhelming relief and deep unease. Someone with significant resources had decided to help them. But who? And why? Meanwhile, across town in his mansion, Bill was receiving a very different kind of call. Thomas was reporting back on his investigation into Emma's Christmas wishes. According to her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, Emma hasn't made any specific requests for Christmas gifts. When asked what she wants, she consistently says she just wants her mother to smile again. Bill felt his heart clench. What about material things? Toys, clothes? Her backpack is falling apart, and her winter coat has been repaired multiple times. She needs new shoes. The teacher mentioned that her current ones let in water. But, sir, there's something else. What? Mrs. Patterson mentioned that Emma has been talking about the homeless man she met last week. She keeps wondering if he's warm enough, if he found somewhere safe to stay. She's been asking her mother if they can look for him to make sure he's okay. Bill closed his eyes. Even with her own family's struggles, Emma was worried about the stranger she had helped. The generosity wasn't situational, it was simply who she was. There's one more thing, Thomas continued. I've been monitoring their apartment, and Mrs. Collins seems suspicious about the sudden financial help. She's making phone calls, trying to trace the source of the assistance. That was exactly what Bill had been afraid of. Sarah was too intelligent not to question such perfectly timed help. Keep me informed of her investigation, and Thomas. I want to see them again, not as William Harrison, but as the homeless man. I need to know how they're doing, and Emma. Emma is still worried about me. Is that wise, sir? Bill fingered the crumpled dollar bill he had kept in his pocket every day since Emma gave it to him. Probably not, but I owe this family more than they'll ever know, and I'm not done honoring that debt yet. As Bill prepared for another day on the streets, he had no idea that Sarah Collins was about to uncover information that would change everything. Her nursing background had taught her to be thorough, to follow paper trails, and she was beginning to notice patterns in their sudden good fortune that pointed to something far more personal than a random charity's generosity. The question wasn't whether she would discover the truth. It was what she would do when she did. Sarah Collins had always been methodical, a trait that served her well during her nursing career and was now driving her investigation into their mysterious benefactor. She sat at the Chicago Public Library's computer terminal, Emma safely at school, armed with a notebook full of questions that kept her awake at night. The Chicago Community Care Foundation existed, but barely. Their website was new, created just 4 days ago according to the domain registration records. The address listed was a P.O. box, and when Sarah called the phone number, it went straight to a generic voicemail. This doesn't make sense, she muttered, scrolling through the foundation's sparse online presence. Someone had paid $180,000 in medical bills and several months of rent, but was using a hastily constructed charity as a cover. Why? Her investigation was interrupted by a familiar voice behind her. Excuse me, miss. Do you have a moment? Sarah turned to see an elderly homeless man standing nearby, the same one Emma had helped a few days earlier. He looked warmer today, wearing a thick coat that seemed newer than his other clothes. Oh, you're the man Emma gave her $1 to, Sarah said, standing up. She's been so worried about you. Are you okay? Did you find somewhere warm to stay? Bill's heart nearly stopped. This close, he could see Michael's eyes in Sarah's face, the same gentle intelligence that had driven a paramedic to risk his life for strangers. The resemblance was so strong it took his breath away. Your daughter is a special little girl, he said carefully, his disguised voice rough with emotion. That $1, it meant more to me than you could know. Sarah studied his face, noting details she had missed during their brief encounter before. Despite his homeless appearance, his teeth were well maintained. His posture spoke of someone accustomed to authority, and his speech patterns suggested education. "Can I ask your name?" she said gently. "People call me Bill," he answered truthfully. "Well, Bill, Emma would love to know you're all right. She keeps asking about you. Sarah hesitated, then decided to trust her instincts. "She's been through a lot lately, lost her father 2 years ago. Helping you seemed to give her hope that good things still happen in the world." The words hit Bill like physical blows. Emma's generosity wasn't random kindness. It was a deliberate choice to create light in a world that had shown her darkness, just like her father. "I'm sorry for your loss," Bill said, his voice barely steady. "Your husband, what kind of man was he?" Sarah's face lit up with the first genuine smile Bill had seen from her. "He was the kind of man who would give you his coat if you were cold, even if it meant he'd freeze. He was a paramedic, spent his whole career helping people, right up until the end." Bill felt tears threatening behind his disguise. "He sounds like a hero." "He was. Michael saved a lot of lives over the years. I just wish." She trailed off, her smile fading. "What?" "I wish someone could have saved his." Bill excused himself shortly after, claiming he needed to find food, but really because he couldn't trust himself not to break down completely. As he walked away, he heard Sarah return to her computer research, unaware that she'd just been talking to the answer to all her questions. 3 blocks away, Bill pulled out his phone and called Thomas. "She's investigating the foundation," he reported. "And Thomas. I just spoke with her. She told me about Michael. Sir, perhaps it's time to—" "Not yet, but soon. Sarah deserves to know the truth, but I need to figure out how to tell her without destroying what little stability they've just found." Indeed, what Bill didn't know was that Sarah had memorized the serial number on the dollar bill Emma had given away, a habit from her nursing days of tracking small details, and she was about to discover that same dollar bill had an interesting history. 2 days later, Sarah made a discovery that changed everything. While researching the Chicago Community Care Foundation's financial backing, she had convinced a former colleague at Northwestern Memorial to help her trace unusual large payments made to the hospital's billing department. "Sarah, you're not going to believe this," Jenny whispered over the phone. "The payment for your family's medical debt didn't come from any foundation. It came directly from Harrison Holdings, LLC. Sarah's blood ran cold. Harrison Holdings was one of Chicago's largest investment firms, owned by billionaire William Harrison. She had read about him in the financial pages: old money, recently widowed, famously reclusive. "That's impossible. Why would a billionaire pay our medical bills?" "I don't know, but there's more. I pulled the payment records, and it was made personally by William Harrison himself, not through any corporate charity division. Sarah, this was personal." After hanging up, Sarah stared at her notebook filled with questions, her mind racing. A billionaire had personally paid their debts, using a fake charity as cover. But why? What possible connection could William Harrison have to their family? She spent the next hour researching William Harrison online, studying photos of the elderly businessman. Most were from charity events or business functions, showing a man in expensive suits with silver hair and sharp blue eyes. In recent photos, especially after his wife's death, he looked hollow, disconnected. But there was something familiar about his face that she couldn't place. That evening, as Emma practiced reading aloud, Sarah found herself distracted by memories. The homeless man named Bill had been educated, well-spoken beneath his rough exterior. His concern for Emma had seemed genuine, almost paternal. "Mama, you're not listening," Emma said, looking up from her book. "I'm sorry, honey. I was just thinking about the nice man, Bill. I keep hoping we'll see him again." Sarah looked at her daughter's hopeful face and made a decision that would change everything. "Emma, tomorrow we're going to look for him." "Really? Really? I have some questions I need to ask him." What Sarah didn't know was that across town, William Harrison was preparing for another day as a homeless man, driven by guilt and a desperate need to somehow make amends for a debt he could never truly repay. He had no idea that Sarah was closing in on the truth, armed with information that would soon expose his carefully constructed disguise. Meanwhile, Thomas had been conducting his own investigation at Bill's request, digging deeper into the December 2019 accident records. What he found in the supplementary reports would provide the final piece of the puzzle that Sarah needed. The medical examiner's report on Michael Collins' death included a note that had been overlooked. Patient's lung damage, consistent with smoke inhalation injury sustained approximately 24 months prior to cancer diagnosis, likely contributed to aggressive disease progression. The timeline was exact. Michael's cancer had been directly linked to his heroic actions on that snowy December day when he saved Margaret Harrison's life. Bill now knew, beyond any doubt, that Michael Collins had died because he chose to be a hero. And Emma and Sarah were suffering the consequences of that heroism, while Bill lived in luxury, unaware of the sacrifice that had given him 6 more precious months with his beloved wife. The weight of this knowledge was becoming unbearable. Tomorrow, when Sarah came looking for answers, Bill would have to decide whether to finally tell the truth or continue living with the lie that was eating him alive from the inside. But Sarah Collins was a nurse, trained to notice details others missed. And she was about to notice something about the homeless man named Bill that would make hiding impossible. The next morning, Sarah and Emma walked the streets around the library where they had last seen Bill. Emma carried a small bag with a sandwich and a thermos of hot coffee, insisting they needed to make sure he was eating properly. "There he is," Emma exclaimed, pointing to a figure sitting on a bench in Grant Park. Bill looked up as they approached, his heart hammering against his ribs. In the morning light, Sarah's resemblance to Michael was even more pronounced, and Emma's bright smile reminded him painfully of Margaret's optimism. "Bill!" Emma ran ahead, her backpack bouncing. "We brought you breakfast." "That's very kind," Bill said, accepting the bag with hands that trembled slightly. "You didn't need to." "Emma wanted to," Sarah interrupted, studying his face intently. "She's been worried about you." As Bill unwrapped the sandwich, Sarah noticed something that made her freeze. On his wrist, barely visible beneath his worn coat sleeve, was an expensive watch. Not just expensive, she recognized it from a magazine ad. A Patek Philippe, worth more than most people's cars. "That's a beautiful watch," she said casually. Bill's hand immediately moved to cover it, but the damage was done. "It's a family piece." "Must be some family," Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. "Mind if we sit with you?" As they sat on the bench, Emma chattering happily about school, Sarah's nursing instincts kicked into overdrive. She began cataloging details. Bill's perfect dental work visible when he smiled at Emma's stories, his posture when he thought no one was looking, the way he spoke, educated diction carefully roughened, but occasionally slipping into natural eloquence. "Bill," Sarah said during a pause in Emma's chatter, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Have we met before? There's something familiar about you." Bill's blood turned to ice. "I don't think so. I'd remember." But Sarah was studying his profile, and suddenly she saw it. The bone structure, the set of his shoulders, even his hands despite the fingerless gloves. She pulled out her phone and discreetly searched for recent photos of William Harrison. When she found one, a candid shot taken at his wife's funeral 6 months earlier, her breath caught. Beneath the grief and expensive clothes was the same face she was looking at now. "Emma," Sarah said carefully, Why don't you go feed the ducks by the pond? I need to talk to Bill privately for a moment. Okay, Mama. Emma skipped away, happy to have a mission. The moment Emma was out of earshot, Sarah turned to face Bill directly. Your real name isn't Bill, is it? It's William Harrison. Bill's disguise crumbled in an instant. The carefully maintained posture of a broken man straightened. His voice lost its manufactured roughness, and the intelligence he had been hiding blazed in his eyes. How did you know? I'm a nurse. I notice things. The watch, your teeth, the way you carry yourself when you think no one's looking. But mostly I know because you're the one who paid our medical bills, aren't you? Bill closed his eyes, defeated. Yes. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why would a billionaire disguise himself as a homeless man and pay the debts of a family he's never met? Bill looked across the park at Emma, who was laughing as ducks surrounded her feet. Because your daughter gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. $1? Hope. Bill's voice cracked. But that's not the only reason, Sarah. There's something else you need to know, something about Michael. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her. What about Michael? Bill met her eyes, and she saw a pain there that matched her own. 5 years ago, my wife Margaret and I were in a car accident. A blizzard on Lakeshore Drive. Our car went off the road, caught fire. Sarah's face went white as understanding began to dawn. A paramedic arrived first before the fire trucks. He pulled Margaret out of the burning car, saved her life even though he got hurt doing it. That man was your husband. The bench seemed to disappear beneath Sarah. No, that's impossible. Michael Collins, Chicago Fire Department, Station 19, December 18th, 2019. He gave us 6 more months together, Sarah. 6 months I treasured every second of after Margaret died. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. The lung damage. The doctor said there might have been an environmental factor that contributed to his cancer. The smoke inhalation from our rescue. I found the medical records. Michael died, at least partially because he chose to save my wife. Sarah stood up abruptly, her hands shaking. You're telling me that my husband died saving your wife and you never knew, never tried to find us, to thank us, to help us? I didn't know his name, the hospital records. I was in shock. Margaret was fighting for her life. By the time I thought to ask, it was too late. I've lived with that guilt for 5 years. And now you're playing dress-up as a homeless man because you feel guilty. The accusation hit Bill like a slap. It started as something else, an experiment. But when Emma gave me that $1, when I saw her kindness... He looked helplessly at Sarah. I realized that the man who saved my wife had raised a daughter who would give her last dollar to a stranger. I had to know who you were. Sarah looked across the park at Emma, still feeding the ducks, blissfully unaware that her world was about to change again. Does she know? Does Emma know who you really are? No. And Sarah, I don't expect anything from you. I don't expect forgiveness or gratitude. I needed you to know that Michael's sacrifice wasn't forgotten, that it mattered, that you matter. But Sarah was no longer listening. She was walking toward Emma, her mind reeling with the implications of what she had just learned. Behind her, William Harrison sat alone on the bench, finally unmasked, watching the family his secret had just shattered walk away from him. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table staring at Emma, who was happily drawing pictures of the ducks they had seen in the park. The innocent joy on her daughter's face made what she had to do even harder. Emma, sweetheart, we need to talk about something important. Emma looked up from her drawing. Is it about Bill? He seemed sad when we left. Sarah's heart ached. Even at 8 years old, Emma had noticed the pain they had left behind. Yes, it's about Bill. He's not who we thought he was. What do you mean? Sarah took a deep breath. Bill's real name is William Harrison. He's a very wealthy man who was pretending to be homeless. Emma's crayon stopped moving. Pretending? But why would he pretend to be poor? It's complicated, baby, but the important thing is that he knew Daddy. Emma's eyes widened. He knew Daddy? How? Sarah struggled with how to explain something so complex to a child. Do you remember how Daddy used to tell you about his job? How he helped people who were hurt? He was a hero, Emma said proudly. Yes, he was. Well, 5 years ago, Daddy helped save someone who was in a car accident. That someone was Bill's wife. Emma processed this information with the gravity that children sometimes possess. So Daddy saved Bill's wife? Yes, and Daddy got hurt doing it. The doctors think that's part of why he got sick later. The crayon fell from Emma's hand. Daddy died because he saved Bill's wife. Partly, yes. But Emma, listen to me carefully. Daddy chose to help because that's who he was. He would have done the same thing for anyone. Emma was quiet for a long time, her young mind working through the implications. Finally, she looked up at her mother with eyes that seemed far too old for her face. Is Bill sad because Daddy died? Yes, sweetheart. He's very sad, and he feels responsible. But it wasn't his fault. Daddy chose to be a hero. Sarah pulled Emma into her arms, amazed by her daughter's wisdom. You're right, baby. It wasn't his fault. Mama, Emma said softly, is Bill the one who paid our bills? Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. He was trying to help us because he felt bad about Daddy. Yes. Emma was quiet again, thinking. Then she pulled away from her mother and went to her small dresser, returning with something in her hand. What's that, Emma? It's the dollar Bill gave back to me yesterday when we weren't looking. Emma held up a crisp dollar bill. He snuck it into my backpack with a note that said, "For the kindest girl in Chicago." Sarah stared at the bill, seeing William Harrison's gesture for what it really was, not condescension, but respect. He had returned Emma's gift because he recognized its true value. Mama, I think Bill is lonely, like how we were lonely after Daddy died. Probably, sweetheart. Do you think Daddy would want us to be friends with Bill? The question stopped Sarah cold. What would Michael want? Her husband had been a man who believed in forgiveness, in second chances, in the power of kindness to heal wounded hearts. I think, Sarah said slowly, Daddy would want us to do whatever makes us happy and helps other people. Then I want to see Bill again. Not homeless Bill, but real Bill. I want to tell him that it's okay, that Daddy wouldn't want him to be sad. Me? Sarah looked at her 8-year-old daughter and realized that Emma had inherited more than just her father's eyes. She had inherited his enormous capacity for forgiveness. Okay, Sarah said. Tomorrow we'll go see him. Really? Really? But Emma, his real life is very different from ours. He lives in a big house, has lots of money, fancy things. Are you prepared for that? Emma considered this seriously. Will he still like to feed ducks? Despite everything, Sarah smiled. I think he probably will. Nay. That night, as Emma slept, Sarah stared at the ceiling, thinking about the impossible chain of events that had brought them to this moment. Michael's heroism had saved a woman he never met, which led to his own death, which left his family struggling, which led his daughter to show kindness to a stranger, which led that stranger to discover a debt he could never repay. Was it fate, coincidence, divine intervention? Sarah didn't know, but she knew what Michael would say. It didn't matter how it happened, only what they chose to do with it now. And tomorrow, she was going to let an 8-year-old girl teach a billionaire about forgiveness. William Harrison hadn't slept since his conversation with Sarah in the park. He sat in his study, surrounded by the trappings of wealth that had once brought him comfort, but now felt like monuments to his isolation. Margaret's portrait watched him from across the room, her painted smile holding what looked like gentle encouragement. When Thomas knocked and entered, Bill looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "Sir, Mrs. Collins called. She and Emma would like to visit you today if you're willing." Bill's heart lurched. "She called? How did she get this number?" "She's quite resourceful, sir. She said, and I quote, 'Tell Mr. Harrison that Emma has something to say to him, and I think he needs to hear it.'" Bill stood and walked to the window overlooking his expansive gardens. In a few hours, Emma and Sarah Collins would walk through his front door, the first guests he'd had since Margaret's funeral. The irony wasn't lost on him that the two people he most wanted to see were also the ones he most feared facing. "Thomas, I need you to prepare something for me." "Of course, sir. I want you to set up a college fund for Emma. Full scholarship, any university she chooses. And I want you to establish a foundation, a real one this time, in Michael's name, for families of first responders who are facing financial hardship." "And how much should I allocate for the foundation?" Bill turned from the window. "10 million to start, more if needed." 2 hours later, the doorbell rang at the Harrison mansion for the first time in 6 months. Bill opened it himself, having sent the staff away for privacy, and found himself face to face with Emma and Sarah Collins. But something had changed. Sarah's anger from the park had been replaced by something else. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to listen. And Emma looked at him with the same genuine warmth she had shown the homeless man, as if his wealth changed nothing about who he was to her. "Hello, Bill," Emma said simply. "Can we come in?" "Of course," Bill said, stepping aside. "Please." As they walked through the marble foyer, Bill watched Emma's eyes take in the grandeur without judgment, only curiosity. Sarah, meanwhile, was studying him, the real him without the homeless disguise. "You look different," Sarah observed. "This is who I really am," Bill admitted, "though I'm not sure that's necessarily better." They settled in the comfortable sitting room rather than the formal parlor. Bill had learned something about real comfort during his months on the streets. "Bill," Emma said, settling into a chair that dwarfed her small frame, "Mama told me about Daddy and your wife." Bill's throat tightened. "Emma, I want you to know—" "It's okay," Emma interrupted gently. "Daddy chose to help because that's what heroes do. He wouldn't want you to be sad about it." The simple words, delivered with 8-year-old certainty, nearly broke Bill's composure. "Your father was a remarkable man." "I know, and he would like you." "How can you be so sure?" "Emma considered this seriously, because you were kind to me when you thought you had nothing, and because you miss your wife the same way we miss Daddy." Sarah watched in amazement as her daughter cut through layers of adult complexity to reach the heart of the matter. Michael had possessed the same ability to see people clearly, without the filters of judgment or prejudice. "Bill," Sarah said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Anything. What do you want from us? Really?" Bill was quiet for a long moment. "I want to honor Michael's memory. I want to make sure Emma has every opportunity she deserves. I want—" He paused, struggling with words that had been locked inside him for months. "I want to feel like Margaret's last 6 months meant something, like Michael's sacrifice wasn't in vain." "And for yourself? What do you want for yourself?" Bill looked at Emma, who was studying a family photograph on the side table with innocent interest. "I want to remember what it feels like to matter to someone. Your daughter gave me that feeling for the first time in years." Sarah felt tears threatening. This wasn't the manipulative billionaire she had feared meeting. This was a broken man trying to find his way back to his humanity through kindness to others. "There's something I need to tell you," Sarah said, "about Michael." Bill braced himself. He kept a journal, wrote in it every day, especially after difficult calls. I found the entry from December 18th, 2019, after you told me about the accident. She pulled out a worn notebook and opened it to a marked page. He wrote, "Saved an elderly woman today. Car fire, bad visibility." She kept saying thank you, but I could see in her husband's eyes that she was everything to him. Sometimes the real rescue isn't saving a life, it's preserving love. Worth the burns on my hands to give them more time together. Bill's vision blurred as Sarah's words sank in. Michael had understood exactly what he was saving. Not just Margaret's life, but their love, their remaining time together. He knew, Bill whispered. He knew how much she meant to me. That was Michael. He saw hearts, not just injuries. Emma, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke up. "Bill, do you want to see pictures of Daddy? I have some in my backpack." For the next hour, Emma shared stories about her father, while Bill listened with rapt attention. Sarah watched the two of them together and saw something she hadn't expected, the beginning of a genuine friendship that transcended the complexity of their shared history. When it was time to leave, Emma hugged Bill goodbye as naturally as she would have hugged any family friend. "Will you come to my Christmas play next week?" she asked. "I'm playing an angel." "I would be honored," Bill said, meaning every word. As Sarah and Emma prepared to leave, Bill called out to them. "Sarah, there's one more thing. I've established a foundation in Michael's name for families of first responders. I'd like you to help me run it if you're willing." Sarah turned back, surprised. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work with me. There's a difference." As they drove away from the mansion, Emma looked back at the large house growing smaller behind them. "Mama, I think Bill is going to be okay now." "Why do you think that, sweetheart?" "Because he's not alone anymore, and neither are we." Sarah realized her daughter was right. Somehow, through tragedy and coincidence and an 8-year-old's pure heart, they had all found something they thought was lost forever. Family. 3 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, William Harrison stood in the wings of Lincoln Elementary School's auditorium, wearing a simple dark suit instead of his usual expensive clothing. He watched through a gap in the curtain as the small auditorium filled with families, and he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: belonging. Emma's Christmas play was about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, angels walking among us, unrecognized acts of kindness that changed lives. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was watching a play about angels performed by a child who had been his own angel in disguise. "Places, everyone!" called the teacher, and Bill stepped back as a group of costumed children hurried past. Emma spotted him and waved, her white angel wings slightly crooked but her smile radiant. "You came," she whispered loudly. "I promised," Bill replied, adjusting her halo. "Break a leg out there, Angel." He found his seat next to Sarah in the 3rd row, among other parents and grandparents. For the first time in decades, he was just Bill. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, just a man watching a child he cared about perform in a school play. "Nervous?" Sarah asked, noticing his hands fidgeting with his program. "Terrified," Bill admitted. "I haven't been to anything like this since James was Emma's age." "When's the last time you talked to your son?" Bill winced. 2 months ago. Business call. We lost each other after Margaret died. Maybe it's time to find him again." Before Bill could respond, the lights dimmed and the play began. For the next 30 minutes, he watched Emma and her classmates tell a story about unexpected angels: the teacher who stays late to help a struggling student, the neighbor who shovels an elderly person's sidewalk, the child who shares lunch with someone who has none. When Emma stepped forward for her solo, her clear voice rang through the auditorium. "Angels aren't always in heaven, dressed in white with golden wings. Sometimes they're standing right beside you, doing ordinary things. They might give you their last dollar or hold you when you cry. They might save your life one snowy day, then teach you how to fly." Bill felt tears stream down his face as Emma's eyes found his in the audience. She was singing directly to him, her words a perfect summary of their impossible journey together. After the play, as families gathered in the hallway for cookies and punch, Bill found himself surrounded by Emma's classmates, all wanting to meet the millionaire who used to be homeless that Emma had told them about. He answered their questions with patience and humor, marveling at how children could accept the strangest truths without judgment. "Mr. Harrison," said Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, approaching with a warm smile, "Emma has told us so much about you. She says you're going to help other families like hers." "We're trying," Bill said, glancing at Sarah, who was helping Emma out of her costume nearby. "The Michael Collins Foundation will launch in January." "That's wonderful. And I understand you'll be volunteering at the school as well?" Bill nodded. 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined himself reading stories to second graders or helping with math homework. Now, it seemed like the most natural thing in the world. As the evening wound down, Bill walked Sarah and Emma to their car, a newer model that had replaced their old Honda, though Sarah had insisted on something practical rather than luxurious. "Thank you for coming," Sarah said as Emma climbed into her car seat. It meant everything to her. "It meant everything to me, too," Bill replied. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I called James yesterday, my son, told him about you and Emma, about what happened. He's flying in tomorrow for Christmas dinner." Sarah's face lit up. "Bill, that's wonderful. How did he react?" "He said it was about time I stopped hiding from life." Bill paused, then added quietly, "He wants to meet the little girl who brought his father back." Emma stuck her head out the car window. "Bill, are you going to be lonely tomorrow?" "Not anymore, sweetheart. But what about you? Are you going to be okay spending Christmas in your new apartment?" Sarah had finally accepted Bill's help in finding them a larger place, 2 bedrooms, in a safe neighborhood with good schools, close enough to the Harrison mansion that Emma could visit whenever she wanted. "We're going to be perfect," Emma said confidently, "because we have each other and now we have you too." And as they drove away, Bill stood in the school parking lot, looking up at the stars. For the first time since Margaret's death, he felt her presence not as a burden of grief, but as a blessing of love. She would have adored Emma, would have seen immediately what Bill had taken months to understand, that sometimes the most profound gifts come in the smallest packages. His phone buzzed with a text from James. "Can't wait to meet the family that saved my dad. Merry Christmas, Pop." Bill smiled, pocketing the phone. Tomorrow would bring Christmas dinner with his son, the Collins family, and probably Emma's stuffed animals, if past visits were any indication. His mansion would ring with laughter and conversation for the first time in years. But tonight, he wanted to make one more stop. 20 minutes later, Bill sat on the bench in Grant Park, where Sarah had confronted him with the truth, looking out at the lights reflecting on the water. He pulled out a crumpled dollar bill, the one Emma had given him, which he had carried every day since. "We did it, Margaret," he whispered to the stars. "We found our way back to what matters." A gentle breeze stirred the winter air, and Bill could swear he heard Margaret's voice carried on the wind. "I never doubted you would, Billy. I never doubted you would." The next morning, Christmas Day, Emma knocked on the door of the Harrison mansion carrying a small, wrapped package. When Bill opened the door, she held it out to him with a shy smile. "I made this for you," she said. Inside was a hand-drawn picture of 3 people standing together, a tall man, a woman, and a little girl, with the words, "My New Family," written in careful 8-year-old handwriting across the top. Bill knelt down to Emma's level, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Thank you, Angel. This is the best gift I've ever received. Even better than money. Especially better than money." Emma grinned and threw her arms around his neck. "Merry Christmas, Bill. Thank you for letting me save you." As Bill hugged her back, he realized that Emma had it exactly right. She had saved him, not with $1, but with a reminder that the most valuable currency in the world is kindness freely given, love shared without conditions, and the courage to open your heart to unexpected angels. The last dollar had bought him everything money couldn't: hope, family, and a second chance at living a life that mattered. And in the end, that was worth more than all his billions combined.